Hi, this is the first in the series of videos in which I will be providing details and explanations related to the video I made on the introduction to phenoutilism. In this one specifically, I will discuss why free will cannot exist under phenoutilism and how consciousness, multiple experiences, and reality may or may not exist. If you haven't yet seen the introduction video to phenoutilism, I suggest you watch it before this one. Finally, I will use the assumption that we are really humans and that objective reality exists, but mostly for ease of communication, you can retain the arguments without the human-centric language. With that said, let us begin. Why free will does not exist and why we think it does. If all we have are just experiences and you believe that free will exists, then this belief must be in some way rooted in experiences, similarly to how your belief that the world exists is rooted in your experiences. So, which experiences make you believe that free will exists? I want you to really think about it. What is it about your life that makes you believe that it is you who is making decisions as opposed to there just being a body that simply responds to stimuli? I believe that similarly to how you use eyes to perceive light, nose to perceive smell, and skin to perceive touch, there is some part of your brain that perceives actions through a teleological lens. For example, if you lift your arm, you will feel your muscles tense, your arm moving, the air around the skin of your arm. You will also see it with your eyes. All of those are experiences that you have when lifting your arm. And alongside them, there is another experience, the experience of there being a you that lifted the arm. As with almost any function that humans are able to perform, this function of prescribing teleological language to things that humans do comes from evolution. I suspect that if we didn't believe that there is a self, then we would kick our own bucket due to the perceived meaninglessness of existence, which we are able to perceive with our other advanced faculties. The point here is that free will is not a function or a feature innate to a human body. It is a feeling, like sight or smell. And by the way, the same goes for the feeling of you doing things in general. You are not doing things. There are just things being done by your body, and then your brain creates an experience of there being a you that's doing things. To escape the counterintuitiveness of this explanation, just remember that 99.999% of the time, you don't even have this feeling of there being a self. When you are watching a movie, playing a video game, or having a discussion, your brain only informs you of the existence of self when it is very relevant, like during these philosophical discussions, or when you have to make a choice. The rest of your life, you are just going through the motions without much thought. Let's move on to consciousness. Depending on how you define consciousness, it could even be equivalent to experiences, that is, just some input that's going on. The key idea here is that phenoutilism does not claim that experiences exist with 100% certainty. It just claims that all the things that we can know and believe in come from experiences. Suppose neuroscience were able to point out exactly how consciousness arises and why it doesn't in animals, for example. That would disprove the existence of consciousness and experience in the sense that most people use these words, but not in the phenoutilistic sense, where experience is just input. And to be clear, I do think that people will discover that consciousness is an illusion of the brain in the future. Another assumption I made in the video is that multiple experiences exist. This is in reference to the fact that we can only have one experience at a time. The experience that you had just a second ago is no more than a memory, which in itself is a part of the current experience. The assertion that I made was that these memories are of real experiences that are just as real as the present one. For example, all the memories of past experiences could have just been implanted in you, and your real life began just now. I simply rejected that proposition. Now let's talk about morality. Clearly, humans have disagreements about the morality of certain actions, which are actually disagreements about the utility of certain experiences. The simplest example you can have is about taste or favorite colors. Then the questions of whether you should eat a vanilla ice cream over the chocolate one or whether you should paint the walls in your room blue as opposed to green are actually moral disagreements, since one of these options will lead to a literally better outcome. For you at least. But suppose everyone in the world agreed that vanilla ice cream tastes better than chocolate ice cream. Does that mean that eating vanilla ice cream is objectively better than eating chocolate ice cream? Obviously, it is not. By that same logic, we cannot claim that things like murder or slavery are bad. It's just that in the Western world, we really don't like them. By the way, even if you believe in a higher authority, like God, morality is not objective. It is still subjective, and good is whatever God likes. All that I mentioned before is more or less accepted in modern philosophical circles. But now I will propose an idea that is really controversial among modern philosophers, and that is that reality is just as subjective as morality. Similarly to how we could all agree that vanilla is better than chocolate, and that would not make vanilla objectively better than chocolate, We can all agree that the Earth is not flat, or that 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, or that humans exist, and that would not make these things objectively true. As an example, a crazy person believes that there is a demon talking to them, and that the demon is really there physically, right in front of them. We would just call that person crazy. But what if all of us saw the demon that was talking to us? Presumably, we wouldn't call ourselves crazy. We would just accept it as a part of objective reality and move on. By the way, in the introduction video, I only asserted that objective reality exists for ease of communication. I could have just added, in my experience of reality, whenever talking about real-life phenomena. The only difference between morality and reality is that one is a set of descriptive statements, statements about what is, and the other is a set of prescriptive statements, or statements about what we ought to do. You could say that another difference is that morality is derived exclusively from the utility of our experiences. But of course, utility itself doesn't just arise. It is shaped by non-utility experiences. For example, being raised in a Muslim country will make you like Muslim culture. Finally, it is a lot easier to disprove objective morality by pointing out that people disagree on their favorite color or their taste preferences. It is ludicrous to claim that people who have a different favorite color from ours are objectively wrong. But it does seem that people mostly agree on reality, and so we assume that what is shared among people, even though it doesn't have to be. And that concludes this video. Let me know if you disagree or if you have some other criticisms in the comments. Visit my website dragondrumsticks.com or my X account with the same handle. Bye.